Good morning, welcome to Breakfast, just after 7:30 on Monday. Breakfast today with Sarah Campbell and John Kay.
Yes, so Keir Starmer has said he is ready and willing to deploy British troops to Ukraine.
Let's speak now live on Breakfast to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who joins us now from Westminster. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
People will be waking up to this news, the Prime Minister talking about potentially sending British troops to Ukraine. Do you want to just run us through the thinking behind what would be a significant development?
Well, there's clearly a huge initiative going on at the moment to end the war in Ukraine, to bring an end to this bloody and brutal conflict caused by President Putin's invasion. We also need to make sure that we secure a just and lasting peace, and not just for the people of Ukraine and their freedom and their liberty, but also for all of us right across the continent of Europe, including the United Kingdom, because what's happened in Ukraine is actually the front line for European defence and security and for Britain's defence and security. We know that President Putin has imperialist and expansionist ambitions. We know he's threatened the security of this country and other allies, and that's why the Prime Minister is signalling today to our friends across Europe, ahead of travelling to Washington next week to meet with President Trump, that the UK is prepared to play its part in securing the long-term future for Ukraine, for Europe, and for Britain's national security. Well, it's for the Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary and the Foreign Secretary to set out the details of any agreement that's reached and the consequences. Certainly not for me to speculate this morning. But what I would say is that the Prime Minister doesn't talk about deploying British servicemen and women lightly. We do so, and the Prime Minister is giving that undertaking today in the Telegraph, ahead of meeting with European leaders in Paris later today, because he sees the front line in Ukraine as the front line for Europe and the front line for Britain, frankly, in terms of our own national defence and security. And so the important thing here is that, as well as bringing about an end to the war in Ukraine, we deter any further Russian aggression or invasion. And it's really important that as NATO allies that we stand together, because that's frankly been the cornerstone of Britain's defence and security since NATO was founded in the aftermath of the Second World War by a Labour government back then. I don't dispute that over the course of the last decade, Britain's defence has been run down by our Conservative predecessors. It's one of many challenges we've had to confront since coming into government 7 months ago. On pretty much every front, we've had to grapple with challenges that, even taken individually, would be big challenges on their own. If I think about my own role as Health and Social Care Secretary, state of the NHS, enormous challenge, could easily occupy the entire government turning that around. But it's one of many challenges: health, security, education, law and order, overflowing prisons. Right across the board we face enormous challenges. And that's why in the last 7 months we've had to face up to those challenges and sometimes make decisions and choices that people might think were unpopular and not very happy with. But it's because we've had to deal with all of those challenges. We've had to make some tough decisions to get Britain out of the massive hole it was left in. And that's why we came into government on defence specifically, saying we've got to get back and up to 2.5% of GDP on defence, because the first duty of any government is to secure the security of its nation. Well, as I say, we came into government with a clear commitment to get up to 2.5%. And we're having to do that alongside grappling with a wide range of challenges. And that's why sometimes we're having to say no when people are coming along with some very worthy things for investment and saying, I'm sorry, but we can't afford to do that right now.
So is that no to 3%, 3.5%?
We've had to make some difficult decisions on tax as well, which haven't been universally popular, but we've had to do that in order to do the heavy lifting to get Britain out of the hole. And people wouldn't thank us if years down the line they see a country that's on a downward spiral rather than a country that's on its way back up. And that's why the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and all of the Cabinet have been doing that heavy lifting in our first 7 months in office. There's still a hell of a lot more to do. But as we're saying today on the NHS, for example, we've delivered our first step to deliver 2 million more appointments in our first year, and we've done that 7 months early. So I hope that reassures some of your viewers who sometimes think, do politicians ever do anything? Can politics make a difference? Did my vote change anything? Well, we are getting on with the job, and I think that's reflected today with the fact that this morning the Prime Minister's talking about our progress on the NHS to cut waiting lists, and then this afternoon off to Paris to meet with European leaders about our security, whether it's action abroad to secure our borders and our national security, or action at home to deal with the priorities of the public on health, on education, on crime and policing. This is a government that's doing what we said we would and getting on with the job. Let's just be clear about this. Strikes aren't some sort of natural disaster. They were, I'm afraid, the result of Conservative government incompetence, and within 3 weeks I had agreed a deal with junior doctors, now resident doctors, to end those strikes, which means we have been able to make more progress more quickly to cut NHS waiting lists, as well as all of the other steps we're taking as part of our reform plan to cut waiting lists, new ways of organising clinics to get more value for money, for the taxpayers' money we're putting in, making sure that we're putting in place more community diagnostic centres so we can diagnose earlier, treat faster, better for patients, less expensive for the taxpayer, so everyone wins. We've hit the ground running on the NHS. I do want to reassure your viewers, though, that yes, we are reporting back today. We've delivered on our first step, and we've delivered it 7 months early. But I don't want anyone watching to think we're doing victory laps. There are still massive challenges in the NHS, a hell of a lot further to go on waiting lists. People are still struggling to get GP appointments, and GPs are struggling, let me tell you, with the hard caseload they've got. And we've also got big challenges on things like ambulance response times and A&E trolley corridor care, which I think is, just an indictment of the state the NHS was left in. So I know there are still challenges. We're not doing victory laps. A lot done, a hell of a lot more to do, but we are reporting back that we are delivering what we promised, and I hope that gives people some confidence that brighter days lie ahead too. Publishing our improvement plan for urgent and emergency care in the coming weeks, and what I want to see is sustained year-on-year improvement in those response times for ambulances. I wish I could sit here now and tell you that by next Christmas there'll be no one waiting on a trolley in a corridor. I can't make that promise. But what I can tell you is that we will deliver year-on-year improvement, and I'm determined to see an end to that kind of corridor care. I don't think it should be allowed to be normalised. It has become common practice, but that doesn't mean we should accept it as normal or normalised or acceptable practice. I understand why it's there now. I understand what frontline NHS leaders are having to grapple with in terms of demand, but we must not allow that kind of care to be normalised in our NHS. It is not dignified, and it is not as safe as it should be. And that's why I'm determined to put an end to it, but it will take time. It's to be reviewed and for the guide to have effectively clinical advice on whether or not that's still the right approach, or whether we can make some improvement there in terms of screening. I think the campaigners are running a fantastic campaign, and there are clearly some massive health inequalities here. For example, black men are twice as likely to die of prostate cancer than white men. So there are some really big life and death challenges here. So it's something we are taking seriously and looking at. And I'm sure as soon as we've got something to report, I'll be back here reporting back to your viewers on whether or not that's still the right approach, or whether we can make some improvement there in terms of screening. I think the campaigners are running a fantastic campaign. So it's something we are taking seriously and looking at. And I'm sure as soon as we've got something to report, I'll be back here reporting back to your viewers.
OK, we look forward to that. Wes Streeting, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now it is 7:43.
So it's something we are taking seriously and looking at. And I'm sure as soon as we've got something to report, I'll be back here reporting back to your viewers.
OK, we look forward to that. Wes Streeting, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now it is 7:43. Thank you for watching.